Right, and that question or the story of leadership and integrity and the story by Ken Mijungo also leads us to the question that we're asking you this morning, a tender reminder of it, right? Do you think the aspirants of elective posts will really pass muster when it comes to leadership and integrity? This is the Chapter 6 of the Constitution as filed by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. They're seeking an advisory opinion from the court to actually get the gist of the matter. There's so much ambiguity, they say, in this particular leadership and integrity, Chapter 6 of the Constitution, in regard also to elections. And we have already in studio a guest with us to take us through this particular topic today and after other issues that we'll be speaking on this morning. We have with us Miguna Miguna, who is the Nairobi candidate for gubernatorial seat. Also, we have Alice Wahome. She is a member of parliament from Kandara. We have Joshua Kiptoo with us, who is a tutorial fellow at the University of Nairobi and an advocate of the High Court. Also, we have with us Senator Kimani Wamatangi. Kimani Wamatangi is a senator from Kiambu. We're eagerly waiting also for Rogo-Manduli to join us momentarily, also to take us through this particular discussion that we're having this morning with us. Right, let's just dive into it and we talk about leadership and integrity. Looking at that particular story that we've just had, Miguna Miguna, what will be your reaction?
Regarding the current case, I think it is excellent. And I just believe that, I hope that the Supreme Court will, for once, make a decisive or come down with a decisive ruling on Chapter 6. Chapter 6 was meant to prevent people, individuals in Kenya who have issues or questions about their integrity prevented from running.
Yes.
It was not about preventing criminals. Criminals are supposed to be automatically prohibited from running. But in Kenya, you have convicted criminals who occupy public office. One of them is Mike Sonko. He has a criminal record and he's running, and I have not even seen his picture in the newspaper. Kideru should not even be allowed to come near anything about public office. First, on Mumias, and I've not seen Mumias highlighted in your newspapers. And secondly, because he bankrupted Mumias. And secondly, because of the audit, the serious questions the Auditor General has raised concerning huge amounts, billions of public money that have been misappropriated, including land in Nairobi since 2013. So yes, it's a welcome move, and I hope that the court would move with speed to at least bring clarity and also to just put a block of people without integrity or questionable integrity seeking, not just occupying public office, so that public resources can be preserved, can be protected, and be used for what they are supposed to be used for, which is creation of job, building of infrastructure, and delivering services. So yes, I am very happy about it.
All right, don't you think or I think it's not really admissible to really try and, cast aspersions on people when we say they're criminals, and that has not been also proven by the courts?
No,
right?
but you see,
so we cannot say they're criminals.
This is where the media is going wrong. Where someone has been convicted after being charged and prosecuted, and those charges were sustained by a court through a conviction, and they were sentenced. And this is by his own admission. So it is not a question of aspersions. It's a fact. If somebody has been convicted, he's a criminal. So I will call him a criminal because that's what the courts have said. If the Auditor General says Miguna has misappropriated, let's say 20 billion or 100 billion public resources, or under my watch, a public entity or asset has been brought to its knees, it is completely legitimate for Kenyans to say Miguna is a crook. I mean, and the media should not equivocate on this. All over the world, the media demands accountability fearlessly.
We'll drill deeper into that.
But in Kenya,
yes,
you are pussyfooting even on your own headlines.
Right, let's hear from Alice Wahome. You think we are pussyfooting? You've not even read the whole
I haven't read the whole, but I'm not sure I understand the terminology that Mr. Miguna has used. But I want to say that the writers of the Constitution, when they were writing the Constitution, did, in a way, balance the question of integrity. Because, you know, politics is a very interesting phenomenon or game in another way.
Yes.
And there are people who would actually want to use politics or your intentions to run for political office to actually hold you out of that intention. And it has been seen that politicians or people who really want to stop you from running would want to use the court processes. And therefore, the writers of the Constitution, and who are the Kenyans, when they were writing the Constitution, also provided a situation where until you are actually proven guilty, until you are processed through a process of the law, through the court process, judicial process, then it is not possible to actually stop somebody from running, because being a suspect in itself does not make you a criminal. It is after you have actually been judicially processed and you have been convicted that you can be now adjudged and you are said, look, you have a record. And therefore, and then that record has to be subjected to the entire due process of the law to the highest court that you wish to visit.
You don't really hold with this view?
I do not agree, yes. Because Lily, being a suspect, you know, we must see courts as an institution of processing people who have been suspected. And until you have a record with you, then you cannot be said to be, the law will not stop you from running. I think we have many cases of people who have been released and found that they were not guilty. Sometimes there were people behind those charges. And if those people are to be stopped from running, then you also curtail their political rights. And you see, a political right is also secured and safeguarded under the Constitution. But of course, I think Kenyans must be able to assess themselves, because, you know, they have an opportunity every 5 years to actually, you know, assess people in terms of questions of integrity. Because the values that we want to maintain as a society should be values that we believe in as a people. And therefore, every 5 years, Kenyans have an opportunity to say it is Alice, and Alice has a question, and therefore we shall not give her our votes. That's another opportunity, and we must, as Kenyans, take that opportunity, so that we then don't give people who have questionable integrity questions offices to run.
Let's say from Honorable Kimani Wamatangi, first of all, you think this also particular case that has been filed by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights is coming late in the day? 80 days to go, right? Speaking of yesterday, today, now it is 79 days to go.
Well, I think one can argue so that it has come a bit too lately. But what is of a lot of interest to me is indeed a comparison of what is and what is not, the reality and what is intended. And you know what? If sometimes you compare what really happens in our public leadership arena and what the Constitution demands, if you read Chapter 6, it's like you're reading a novel. I mean, if you compare the two. I mean, if some of the demands of public office as far as integrity is concerned in Chapter 6 are probably unreachable, they are incomparable to what we have in public leadership. Look at the level really which the bar is set. I mean, it demands that a leader demonstrates respect for the people, brings honor to the nation and dignity to the office.
We will exhaustively look into that.
Yeah, fine. As I'm making my point, I'm sure when we are looking at it in depth, but I want to draw my comments from the demands of the Constitution and the case has filed. Because then what you would want to be asking yourself, if indeed these demands, including honesty in the execution of public duties, tell me who in the public arena really would pass this particular test? And I think
that's the question we asked this morning.
It's a good question you asked. And I think that what we would need to say, and what Alice was saying to begin with, is true in law, because you find, and I'm sure Joshua will take on that, the biggest problem always has been that once you take on somebody, then the next thing they'll do is they'll move you to court and say, as per the law, I'm innocent until proved guilty. And so you let that person pass the hurdle, and they're going to go and run. But I tell you, we must find a way. We must find a way of implementing this chapter 6, because this is what good leadership and good governance is all about. I mean, if we can't meet these basics, really, then leaders have no business at all being in leadership.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, we can hark back also to 2013 there, and where we saw this particular chapter being subjected to sort of mutilation from members of parliament, and they said they'd watered down the Leadership and Integrity Act of the Constitution. So what sort of ambiguity are we having in this particular chapter 6 of the Constitution that also the NGO, the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, is seeking advisory opinion from the courts?
Now, when you see the Kenya National Human Rights Commission going to court, it's a frustration from the fact that what the Constitution envisaged, Senator has said very well that we need to find a way. The Constitution gave a way of implementing and executing this chapter. If you look at Article 80, the responsibility was solely given to the legislature, in this case the parliament, and I'm sure the Senate also, being a custodian of county interest, also has a role to play in that. So parliament was given the full mandate, and it was specific to the sense that the parliament had to make provisions necessary for full implementation. Did that happen? It didn't happen. If you remember the Commission of Implementation under Nyachai, they complained bitterly, the civil society complained bitterly, because they came with a draft that was more or less like a stakeholder kind of an agreement, and when it got to parliament, this is where the conflict of interest arises. Our Kenyan legislature, of course, has a membership that has questionable character, that if they are to put up a very strong legislation, of course you would understand the possible implications. The implications would be that quite a number of them may be locked up. So out of that conflict of interest, you find that the MPs in 2013 coming forward watered down. Again, there are two things here. There's the law and there's the practice. When a law is written down, as lawyers we call it, that is the letter of the law, but there's the spirit of the law. What was the spirit of the law? The spirit was, let's have strong institutions which would always act as a watchdog. And that is why you have the EACC, you have the Directorate of Criminal Investigation. Why would we then insist on you getting a certificate of good conduct? Why would we say that you have to get EACC clearance? Why would we say that you have to get clearance from CRB? The idea was we don't need to rely on court as the first option, but we have these institutions that were supposed to give clearance. If those institutions do not give clearance, what happens? The frustrations boils over. That is why now you find someone going to court asking for interpretation. Ideally, the idea should be this: let a person be denied by EACC such clearance, then let that person go to court and petition and say, my rights have been infringed. So the court would be more or less like an appellate. If I'm to apply for the certificate of good conduct and I have questionable criminal conduct or record, then it will be easy for me to be flagged out. So the DCI will deny me. If I run to court, DCI will come and tell the court, these are the basis for denial. And that's how the chapter would be executed. But what has happened? The institutions, I think they have been either timid. Again, the precedent set is that it seems they seem to be, the political class is untouchable. That's a fact. From 2013 coming forward, and there's this constant narrative that has always been used against, I think, the current leadership, that if the president and the deputy president, even facing the ICC charges, they were let to run, why should it be applied to us? So since then, the narrative has always been that if our top two leaders were allowed to run, then that shows the rest of us cannot be denied the same. So since then, you have this political class that is shielded from this chapter, that even when it came to legislation, now you would understand why it was watered down. So applying it will be difficult, considering that the same leadership that you expect to legislate are the same ones that will be caught by the law. Just like when the law came about the degrees. Why did we change the law and say only governors should have degrees? It was out of the realization that if the law is applied up to the member of parliament level, most MPs would be locked out. So we always legislate with that some kind of a lens of conflict of interest. So I think the court is more or less cleaning up our mess. Institutions that were supposed to deal with this have not been able to deal with.
All right, but are we facing also a sort of legal minefield here?
Not at all.
Because we'll see a lot of these aspirants who have been mentioned,
Yes.
they'll go and they'll actually take injunctions in the courts right now.
No problem.
And the exercise now will prolong again. We are strapped for time.
I don't think so. If you look at the application made by the Kenyan National Human Rights Commission, it is on the basis of a certificate of urgency. And secondly, it is on the basis that IEBC is supposed to clear the same candidates within a week. So there is some urgency. They can appeal, no problem. But the courts at the moment are working on the basis that it is of utmost urgency.
All right, but we cannot see also from the institutions if it will be seamlessly flowing. We have IBC, we have EACC. Along the way, the interface between the institutions also will not really work smoothly, so to speak, in this case.
But IBC, I think they're trying, in fact, if I saw what they said they're now working with 16 institutions. My only concern is, why do you forget the same aspirants have already got clearance? So what more is IBC doing? They got clearance.
Good question. And of course, even today, they're meeting some of the aspirants in Mashinani.
Yes, they got clearance from DCI, from EACC, so what more will they be looking for?
So we are not facing an exercise in futility, Miguna Miguna.
I agree with a lot of what Joshua is saying, but some of it I don't agree with. Nobody has gotten clearance as yet from the IBC.
Because
the purposes for party nominations, and we know what parties are, I've said they're fictional constructs. So some of those so-called clearance, I can't take to the bank. Some of it is just PR exercises. So we are yet to see real clearances. But what I can tell you, which is quite clear, is this, that the law should be very clear, and the law is actually very clear. If, say, for example, HELB, which is the Higher Education Loans Board, says that one has not cleared their university or loan or whatever, and that person is deemed not to have met Chapter 6, the IBC would be able to lock that person out, and there is no court that can overturn it, because it is what it is.
Yeah.
If the Commission for Higher Education says, for instance, that Debarl's university degree is forged, that's it really. Even the Supreme Court cannot overturn that. So even though you are talking about injunctions, they will fail, all of them, if in fact an institution comes forward and says this is the case. This is how it is. So say, for instance, the people that I've mentioned, the Auditor General wrote to the IBC and said, yes, there is evidence that so-and-so misappropriated funds.
Yeah.
That's it. That's a dead end. If the EACC did the same, that's a dead end. The problem has been that the revolving door at the institutions have been compromised, and they have not unequivocally said so. So now, to go back to the issue that my friend Wamatangi raised, who will pass this test? He asked the question and then answered it somewhat by saying, if we cannot meet the provisions of Chapter 6, then we have no business being in leadership positions. So, in fact, I agree with him. If we find that out of all these leaders, they fail, kick them out. Kick all of them out. Lock them out. It is time that we as Kenyans respected the provisions of the Constitution and the sanctity of the Constitution and the aspirational quality of it. The Constitution is the cardinal law. So if, say, for example, members of Parliament pass the Leadership and Integrity Act that contradicts the Constitution, to the extent of that contradiction, the Constitution prevails. That law becomes nugatory, it becomes completely useless. If you pass a law that contradicts the Constitution, the law is of no consequence. And the Supreme Court should be able to come down and say the Leadership and Integrity Act is of no consequence and Chapter 6 prevails. And so every question that comes to court will be interpreted based on the provisions of Chapter 6, no matter how high the bar is set. In fact, I love that the bar has been set so high in Chapter 6, because that's the way it has to be. And that is the way it is all over the world in functioning democracies. In the United States, for example, right now, if you're taken to court for having, say, grabbed public land, you will not run. You will not run for public office. Nobody will wait for you to be convicted. Serious questions have been asked credibly based on evidence. And a public institution called the public prosecutor has found it necessary to lay charges against you. That is the end of the story.
So you don't have to go through the whole gamut of the judicial process until you're convicted.
That is only for determining whether or not you are a criminal.
No.
You see, now I'm a lawyer and I can tell you, the purpose of a trial is only to find whether Debarl or Miguna is a criminal. It's not to determine whether or not Miguna is suitable for public office. The determination of criminality determines whether you go to jail, whether criminal sanctions are put against you, but stopping you from running. You know, running for public office is not a right, as people think. It is a right with a caveat if you meet Chapter 6.
All right. Okay. Let's hear
Let
from
me
Alice.
briefly, because we must be very careful what we say on this national TV. Eh?
Yes.
Because we are talking about individual rights, and political rights are individual rights. They are also constitutionally guaranteed. When Miguna says that actually the minute you have questions regarding your integrity, then you should be stopped from running under Chapter 6. If you look at qualifications of who can actually be allowed to run, it is also stated in the Constitution, Article 99. Just quickly look at Article 99, sub-Article 2, disqualification and qualifications. A person is disqualified from being, that is sub-Article 2 of 99, Article 99, is disqualified from being elected a member of Parliament if the person is a state officer or a public officer other than a member of Parliament, has at any time within 5 years immediately preceding the date of election held an office. It goes further on the question of integrity. It says that if one is found in accordance with any law to have misused or abused a state office, a public office, or in any way to have contravened Chapter 6, that person is not, however, disqualified under this subclause, unless all possibility of appeal or review of relevant sentence or decision has been exhausted. And that's what I said before. Yes, you may have questions raised about you. You may be facing a legal tussle in court. But until you are judged to have been, to have committed that particular offense, then nobody will buy you. And therefore, IEBC is not going to, because on the basis of allegations, because they remain allegations, they remain suspicions, until this evidence is brought before a court of law, it is tested, and then the court has said this. And then if you get a sentence and you appeal during that preceding period, you are still not going to be stopped. And that is the position under the Constitution. Because the Constitution must balance the very important principle of innocence until you are proven guilty. And he said he's a lawyer. He understands those principles. Quickly? So the question of Chapter 6 against these other qualification provisions. And that's why I said, I think Kenyans as a society must actually then be able to also intervene in between. Yeah.
Debarl, can I say something very quickly? You see, the problem here with Mheshimiwa is that she's not applying the rules of interpretation. She's reading the Constitution as a layperson. Chapter 6 is not qualified by any other chapter. It's not subject to Chapter 8. Chapter 8 is subservient to Chapter 6. So you cannot use Chapter 8 to say, because Chapter 8 says things which you deem contradictory to Chapter 6, therefore Chapter 8, the provisions of Chapter 8 apply. No, that's not the way you read the Constitution. Chapter 6 is supreme on leadership. So anything that contradicts the provisions of Chapter 6 are nugatory. That's how constitutions are read. Okay. You read the Constitution as a whole, but then you understand which provisions are cardinal to the Constitution, the heart of the Constitution. On leadership, the heart and soul and mind of the Constitution is Chapter 6. Anything else is irrelevant.
Okay.
So when the matter goes to court, the court will not read chapter 8,
Thank you.
not read chapter 10, and say, oh, now chapter 6 is qualified by this other chapter.
All right,
Like
let's
that.
say from Kimani,
Happens
isn't it
like that.
interesting that we have lawyers who are not seeing eye to eye on the same issue?
Are not agreeing.
I mean,
Yes.
you know, I tell you, because you're very right. You know, that is, but I think that's the nature of law, and it's also the nature of lawyers. If you look at most of the time, even in when they're arguing in court, they never seem to see eye to eye.
But there is the correct
but you
one
see,
and the wrong one.
I think what we need to be guided by is actually what happens. If you look at, for example, like in the case, look at the case where the former South Korean president was taken to try and impeached, and see, it was purely a matter of integrity that took her out of office, and I think that's where we can draw the parallel. That a whole sitting president was removed from office barely or merely because of allegations of another person having tainted or used her office to gain. You know, it is purely a matter of integrity. But then another important lesson to still draw from the same is that they had to let the whole process run through while she was still in office.
Yes.
And until they exhausted the
was
process
impeached through the
of
process.
ensuring that indeed it is proven that she was guilty as charged, although it was on a matter of integrity. When they put the dot, the full stop on the process, that's when they let
No,
her
that's
go.
not actually true.
You know,
She's actually charged right now.
Because
the process has
no,
not
no,
ended,
no,
and she's
we're
already
talking
been
about.
removed.
We're not talking about we're not talking about charging in court. We are talking about the political process of impeaching somebody and removing them from office.
But we're not talking about impeachment here.
Because the question we have here is, should people run for public office on integrity issues? And
but
you're
I
the only,
think you're
you're the
mixing two
same
things.
person who has said that charging somebody or trial is supposed to determine criminality, not suitability
Correct.
for office.
Not suitability.
So,
Yeah.
on the question of suitability, I think you also have to be clear, Miguna, because
On the question of
because
qualification.
you see,
You're mixing two things.
because you see, at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, and this has been the experience and the practice in this country all the time, that the court will always be the door through which these people, everybody will pass. And on that one question,
It has been tested, actually.
I've not
Wamatangi.
been judged to be guilty. Until I'm judged to be guilty, that's when you stop me. However, it is my feeling, actually, and I'll tell you why I say this, because I'm a member of the Public Accounts Committee, and Miguna has been referring to a few cases here. And for your information, Miguna, tomorrow we are having a meeting with the Chief Justice, with the Chairman of IBC, with DPP, IG, and all those offices. And we have invited them on one single question as a committee to ask them, where does Chapter 6 sit in relation to governors who have refused to account for public funds that they have misused for the last 4.5 years, and we are now 3 months to the ballot, less than 3 months to the ballot. We want to ask the chairman of IEBC, are you going to be signing the papers for a governor who has never answered queries and have been leveled against him by the Auditor General? And we'll be very keen to hear the answer that they'll be giving.
Although that will not be a judicial.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. But also remember that the committee's proceedings are also quasi-judicial.
No, I know.
So, the point we wanted to determine really is the same. I mean, where does integrity sit in this entire process? I believe one way or the other, we must find a way of applying Chapter 6 to ensure that people are motivated and inclined to want to live up to it, other than run to the defense. I think that's where the contradiction is.
All right, let's hear from Joshua.
Let me flip it this way. It's two-way. There's before and there's after. When you talk about the impeachment process, that is while you are in office. Those are offenses committed while in office. The South Korean case was, she's not accused before presidency. It was during her term in office. So I want us to separate that. Then secondly, if we are to say that we shouldn't apply this chapter when it comes to vying or to candidates, then the question would be, why double standard? Why then apply the same when we appoint the cabinet secretaries, when we appoint the permanent secretary? Why do we again apply and say we have to vet them? Don't you think it falls flat for you to vet appointive positions and don't vet elective position? And the vetting for elective position is that we are not choosing the candidates. We are just saying, do they meet the qualifications? Do they meet the standard? And for your information, the constitution was not agreed by anyone else apart from the citizens. It's all of us, collective. So if we are to say that we are to apply only after leadership, then that's an academic exercise. Let's not apply it. Don't focus on, like, when someone is in office, then you start investigating. That is nonsensical because of this. If at the time when this person was offering candidature, we never bothered to do our homework, why then should we start hunting down the same person while in office? And that has happened before. So I think our discussion should be, why are we not executing the same in a fair manner? As long as we give fair, equal chance, what is the problem with that? For example, we can't just say it is up to the court to determine. The court has its place. But before the court is supposed to exercise its hand of justice, yes, why do we forget the constitution was very particular in this, that the legislature or parliament has the obligation? Why then did Parliament legislate on the Leadership and Integrity Act? If indeed we needed the court to do, because the courts have been in existence, the courts do not need, for example, to be told you are the one to implement. Not at all. We have the institutions. Debarl, for example, are you aware that even if I'm to apply for a job, be it even in a private sector, I'll be told I have to come with a clearance from HELP, I'll be told I have to come with a clearance from the Directorate of Criminal Investigation. Why would they tell me that? Because they need to have full disclosure. It is idea of material disclosure. Let's know who we are dealing with. So we are not saying that we seek to weed out people, but rather we are saying, in fact, this is something that should have been done 6 months ago, that each candidate is told you have an obligation. And I think that has already, in fact, it is already happening. So why are we refusing that basis? It is simple. If the institutions were good enough and you have a chance to appeal. If EACC, for example, raises a query and say, I do not qualify, I should not be allowed to run as a candidate, I have my political rights, the High Court Constitutional Division will be waiting for my petition. I can petition, I can say my rights are being infringed. And that is when I feel the court should act. But rather, if we are waiting upon the court that the matter has to go to court, that one will be a failure on our part. To be specific, why do we think the political parties dispute tribunal are being overwhelmed with work? It's simple. If our parties would have the institutions to be able to deal with those disputes, yes, we wouldn't run to court first. So we should first look at it this way. Let us empower the institutions. Let the institutions work. Then, if you feel aggrieved, the courts are always open. Simple as that.
Thank you.
Just like Waititu.
All right, thank you. And let's continue.
Nobody gave him a chance, but he won.
Okay, but we continue with the discussion on leadership and integrity. And I think also that cartoon is very apt on what we are discussing this morning. And before we went to international news, we were on you. You wanted to say something. I hope you
Yes,
lost
I wanted
track
to
of
say
those.
something about the integrity issue and particularly on what my friend Joshua also was saying. You see, there are three processes, legal processes that were being confused just because of indisciplined debate. First of all, there is a legal avenue. This legal avenue always is the last avenue, not the first. Then there is, Honorable Wamatangi was talking about the impeachment process, and Honorable Wahome. The impeachment process is both a legal and a political process, but it's not administrative. What is happening now, number one, administratively, the IBC has to qualify candidates. And to qualify candidates, you need instruments. And these instruments come from their own administrative rules, the Elections Act, the Integrity Act, and the Constitution. And it's relying on constitutional bodies to bring for it certain evidence and materials to be able to administratively qualify candidates. And the question that is before the court now, And the question that is always before the court is this. Somebody comes up with a dispute, or 2 people or 3 people or many come and say, we have a dispute here, we would need it resolved. That is what goes before the court. A court has no jurisdiction by its own to create cases and to preside and determine these cases. So only cases that are brought before it by people are determined. But that doesn't mean that a matter must go to court for the IBC to make a decision. Of course, you can challenge the IBC decision. So the decision right now that the IBC is faced with, say for example with the presidential candidates, is number 1, do these candidates have degrees? Because it is in the constitution. Are those degrees legitimate, or they are fake or forged? 2, do they meet the integrity criteria set out by Chapter 6 of the Constitution? Have they produced evidence of that? Is anybody challenging their integrity?
Thank you.
These are the questions, and we can't mix them up. So in South Korea, the person had been elected. Then there were allegations of misappropriation or extortion or corruption. The person then was impeached through a political legal process. Then once impeached, she was then charged. But she could have been prevented from running if the allegations that she faced of last month had been there when she ran for office.
Thank you.
And she would have been prevented from running.
All right, so what is the way forward with this particular exercise that is being, or this particular petition that we have from the NGO? Is it an exercise in futility? Will it bear any fruits? Right, because
it's not the NGO. This is a national, this is a constitutional body. And it is very important that you underline that. This body is created by the Constitution. The Kenya National
Commission.
Yes.
Yeah,
the impact, I think, Debarl would
Yes.
be, I think it would strengthen the hand of IEBC. I don't know if you've looked at I think papers yesterday, it was captured, and it was announced also last week, that the IEBC is engaged with around 16 agencies, EACC, DCI, all those agencies, with a view of trying to implement Chapter 6.
Yes.
So I think the impact should be this. If the court rules and gives a strong opinion as to how the same, I think the impact would be IBC would have a strong hand in executing or trying to put in, because you know the problem is this: we are late into the game. That is number 1. Number 2, anytime we have such late decisions and the political temperatures, the politicians can always turn the tide. You know, they can cry wolf and cry victim, and that again may scare IBC. So I suspect if Supreme Court, depending on the decision of the Supreme Court, it can have an impact on strengthening the hand of IEBC in denying some the ticket. But again, it will still be a case of wait and see. IEBC has not proven to be this tough guy who can take out. I think they would be worried about muddying the waters at this point. And you know, the political formations are already here. Jubilee is already clear. NASA is clear. The independents are clear. I suspect they wouldn't wish to take the risk of destabilizing at this late on. Correct. But the Supreme Court, going forward, it is also for posterity. Going forward, we will rely upon that. Possibly it can generate a reason for legislature to relook the statute and say, we didn't get it right, going forward we should get it right. So anytime a decision is made like that, it is for posterity and we can still use it in the future. But for now, I think maybe it may be too late to the game. IBC may be scared with the implication if they choose to block out others. It may be partisan because, for example, let me give a very simple hypothesis. If they block only 2 persons from the opposition, NASA, what will happen? NASA will come out and say this is a conspiracy. If the same again happens, so I suspect, based on the political undertones and the time, that may not have that direct impact, but it will strengthen their hand. So but going into the future, posterity.
Posterity.
That is important.
You see, qualifications are individualized. To qualify, to present your documentation as a person who qualifies is individualized. And you present as Alice Wahome. He will present as Miguna. The court process that is that has been filed by Kenya National Human Rights Agency will possibly give a way forward direction. Direction, because the Supreme Court necessarily doesn't really give judgments. It gives basically advisory. It will possibly help the courts to interpret Chapter 6 thereafter if they are visited by an applicant who is facing challenges in terms of their presentation not being accepted by IEBC. But IEBC on the face value will not look at documents and say they are not good documents. It will not happen. If I go with my documents, I have received my documents from various institutions, IEBC will accept them, and it is for anybody who thinks that they are not okay then to challenge those documents. Because it's not possible. It's very clear. They will ask me for certain documents. There will be a list that I will produce.
Actually,
and if I have met the qualifications and the criteria and have been issued with the documents by the various institutions, then IBC will clear me.
All right, and of course that exercise I understand has begun today. On the ground with the IBC, most of the aspirants.
So by now they should have already got those clearances from those entities.
We couldn't even get our regular aspirants,
including your nomination papers from your political party or political parties registrar for independent candidates.
No, but Debarl, where probably there is a confusion. You see, when you file your self-declaration form with Section 13 of the Integrity Act 2012, with EACC, they just stamp it. You don't know what they are sending to IBC. So you can actually go to IBC and find that they have a report there which says that they have not cleared you. So it is not true, as Honorable Wahome is saying, that you just present your documents, IBC must accept them. That's not true. Secondly, you can go to the Commission for Higher Education, for example, people with degrees from outside, or people with degrees from within.
They deny you, yes.
And then the Commission writes that in their view, this degree is not genuine.
Authentic,
in which case you can still go with your degree, but you will not be qualified.
No, they won't
Number
issue
three,
you with the document.
No, they will have been there. They give you a letter and they tell you we can still send a letter even after you are gone. If we find something after you are gone, because they contact the universities, they ask them if these things are valid. They don't have to contact you. They write to the IBC. You arrive there. They have written asking questions about your degree. You can still be stopped. How about KRA? How about all these institutions? You can arrive there and there is a confidential communication to the IBC. Of course, you will get disclosure, but you can be stopped. It is not true that just because you are an aspirant or a candidate, you arrive at the IBC and they must accept your documents. That's not true.
All right.
Okay.
Therefore, they would not have no power.
I said your documents have been issued by various institutions.
But
just a moment. Let's hear from Mama.
What I like to ask, why always at the last minute? I mean, why do they do it? Why are things done this way? It is not fair on the candidates, not fair on the electorate, not fair on the country. These things were to be done. These clearances were to be done. The people who had question marks on their heads, we knew them, or we heard about them. But why don't they ever do anything early? Why are they heaping things now on this electoral commission? You just came recently. And there's a lot on their plate. They have got a lot on their plate. They are new. They have a lot on their plate. The time is not there. Why do the courts not also act? I've had this case of, for example, the governor of Mombasa. The case on his qualification has gone on forever. Why isn't it ever determined? Why isn't it ever finished? Nothing is ever finished in this country. They leave things for the last minute. Now, Amos Kimunya, when did he misappropriate this money? When he was in power, when he was I think when he was in the Ministry of Finance, and that was quite some time back. Why don't these things ever get cleared? They just left there to be used maybe, at the appropriate time. And as I said the other day, right now, any of them, if they are stopped from standing, they'll just say they're enemies. I've organized for them not to stand because their enemies are scared of them. And they'll use it very effectively. It is also not fair on them to leave them to spend time, spend money, go around. It is difficult. Mobilization is very difficult. And some of these people who are in decision-making places have never been candidates. I've been. and I know how tough it is. For somebody to come at the last minute, now and they knew all along that there was a question mark on your character or on your qualification or on your performance in the past. Why don't they do? Why isn't ever anything done in this country in time? Why do we muddle? Why is it a last minute situation? I want to know why. This is very important. And to tell me that this what's being done now is for posterity, I think anybody can go to court. Anybody, any Kenyan can go to court and stop these people, any of these people from standing at the last minute. And what happens? It will be too late for them to be replaced by their parties. Or even, you understand what I'm trying to say? I think this whole muddle in the political arena, I don't know if it's deliberate, I don't know if it's, but whatever it is horrible and it is not necessary.
So the timing is, it is ill-timed, we should say.
It is ill-timed, absolutely. Ill-timed. There was no need to leave it to the last minute. No need at all. There was.
But you see, the culture of impunity thrives in chaos.
Yes.
So it is deliberate. There is nothing that is accidental in a messy situation like our country.
Right.
Everything is designed.
So are you saying the Kenya National Human Rights?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying
yes,
the
Debarl,
chaos.
What I wanted to say was that, in the discussion, I think the problem we've been having, and I brought this up here in this forum before, and remember I cited an example. We called, there was time we summoned the former chair of IEBC to our committee and in Parliament, and the question we were asking him was, how is it that his institution is silent on these issues, especially when a case is taken to his office? Somebody has got to be passed or allowed to run, and he was very clear. He said simply, once you bring the person, then the next thing this person will do is they will go to court. It is not upon me in IEBC to determine either the culpability or the innocence of a person. But I'll tell you also, Debarl and our viewers this morning.
That's why he was removed.
All these institutions, you see the EACC.
He couldn't do his job.
If you see the DCI's office, all the other institutions, including the courts, every institution, in as far as this venture is concerned, operates in silos, in compartments. None of acts in tandem or in tune with the other, and such that you find when EACC has done its work, then they'll close it there. But there is no edge along which they correlate with IEBC. On the question of how do you get cleared to go and run, and I think this is something we have to deal with at the political parties level. Because ask yourself, when we go to the political parties to get a nomination certificate that this person has been nominated to be the senator for Kiambu or for Nairobi, what have you taken there to be cleared and nominated to be the candidate? It is those documents you're talking about. They'll ask you for your integrity report. They ask you for your academic certificates and so on. Once you take them there, and we said this here another time, ask any candidate here who has run. When you go to the political parties, what vetting do they do of your documents? Zero.
Margaret
Wamatangi
was stopped.
So
you go and take your documents. Probably in IEBC. I'm talking about the political parties level, Miguna. Before you get a nomination certificate, you didn't have to go for one. You're an independent.
Margaret Wamatangi was stopped in 2013.
At the political
got the certificate from
at the political party level, when you are going to get your certificate of nomination, there is zero vetting.
There is vetting. Maybe in your party.
They will. No.
Political parties don't vet.
They don't vet. Once you just go and present your documents, they will stamp them and they issue you the certificate. As long as you got the most votes. End of story.
I remember my political party vetting my documents. So I don't know if maybe they are too busy these days to vet. There are too many of you, maybe, but they vet.
But they are too crooked.
Or the people who should be vetting are the ones who are crooked anyway.
Which party was that then, Orie?
But they ought to vet, and they must vet, because if they don't vet, then why are you taking those documents there in the first place? Why?
And Debarl, it would be egregious to say that the IEBC should, as my friend has said, that Hassan said, he has nothing to do. I mean, so why is he being paid? They have a job to do. They have a duty under the Constitution
Miguna,
to vet candidates. And this is how it should be done. In fact, if it is done the way I'm saying, then there would be no chaos in this country. There would be no maize shortages which are sudden. And the country would be ruled by leaders of integrity. Right now, what we don't have are leaders of integrity, because things are not done the way they are supposed to be done. Rules are not upheld. There is no set criteria, and people do not get into positions of power based on merit.
Thank you.
It is just money.
You know,
Thank
we
you.
shall be presenting our nomination papers, our documents to our constituency or ward returning officers. They absolutely have no capacity to actually do vetting. On that day, they have 2 days to receive all the documents and actually return them to the national office of the IEBC. So it is not their duty at that day, at that stage, to actually vet. The vetting process should have been done by the various institutions, and they would presume that the documents are okay. It would be one or two very unusual case for them to say this document doesn't look okay. You know, maybe casually they can look at a document and query and possibly quickly subject it to some authority.
Right,
but on that day, I can tell you, they will be receiving Miguna's documents.
We are not talking about a day. We are talking about a process.
Thank you, thank you. Now we need to also get
An election is a process.
to see what our viewers are saying on social media as well. And Usha, she's standing by.
But I think we have over-labored this debate.
Yeah, there were other.
I mean, there were
Interesting
other
conversation
issues.
over there, and it goes on online. Seen a lot of tweets and messages coming your way. So the question we were asking today was, do you think aspirants seeking elective posts will pass the leadership and integrity test? And we have Stephen who says, of course they will. Chapter 6 on leadership and integrity only applies in theory. So I think he meant, of course, they won't. Peter Kinyua says, we don't have the integrity meter. We have Bingu Mpia who says they're just suspects like others. And Leon finally who says, not in Kenya. Integrity was buried many years ago. So on Facebook, a lot of people don't seem to believe we do have leaders with integrity. We have on Twitter, we have Brian who says, I see, this is on a light note, I see Donald Trump took a Baba challenge in Israel. Remember, we had Baba also praying on the wall. We also have Kabaki who says, methinks Kenya set itself up when we allowed Uhuru to run while facing crimes against humanity charges. We also have Shiro who says, is this question, albeit late, the die was cast when we voted nominees. Did we vote integrity or did we vote political alignments? Very important question. We have George who says, one thing about Kenya is when you have money, you are above the law. Look at how many governors stole money but are still vying. We also have Zephaniah who says, I think Miguna's ideas will be good for Nairobi so that we can break away from the entrenched political, tribal, class dynasties. Yes. We have we have John Gidanga who says, Chapter 6 and others can never work if the top leadership is weak. Sloppy leadership weakens the strength of a good constitution. And finally, we have Kevin who says, leadership and integrity question is only asked during elections. Why? Yet integrity is indeed a way of life. That's true. Integrity should be a way of life and not only asked during election period. But as you can see, a lot of people seem to think that we do not have ethical leaders, leaders with integrity. So perhaps the leaders watching need to come out more strongly on their integrity. So keep the conversation going. AM Live and TV is how you can get us. That is on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. Back to you, Debarl.
Many thanks indeed, Usha there. And yeah, the probing question is, why do we normally bring up the issue of integrity when we are getting up towards a general election? A good question there from Kevin Osido as well. But we want to see, as we're winding up, maybe we can begin with you, Honorable Ambassador Rogo, right? As we're heading towards general election, looking at all leaders that we have right now, and it's very key that we talk about leadership and integrity. I think Wamatangi is saying that we'll be belaboring the point here, but it's very key. This is where everything is predicated on. So it's a very, very crucial conversation. Do you think we have leaders who will pass through the grid and come with shining colors, squeaky clean?
Quick clean is not part of the Kenyan political arena. It is bags of money. Bags of money. And that is what is, unfortunately, we have made it into a culture that, to the extent that they will ask Miguna, you want to be governor, do you have money? That's what they ask, that's the question they ask. And if he says he doesn't have them, they say, then why do you bother? We don't want people who are like us, who have nothing. I don't see anybody quickly. The arena is full of, is a mixture of the bad and the good and the middle group. And I find that the more crooked you are in the Kenyan political arena, the quicker you succeed. I don't know why. They don't, and I say the electorate seem to want these tainted people. I don't know what's wrong with them. If they have a chance to choose somebody who's straight, who's on the surface of it looks reasonably straight, they're not interested. They want these ones that lie to them, these ones that cheat them, these ones that run. Provided he has bags of money to spread around, they're quite happy. So I would say to my brother here, bags of money. If you can do it very quickly, get bags of money. That's what will work in Nairobi. Nothing else will matter. Just bags of it to spread around.
Yes,
thank you.
Let me disagree with my friend Ambassador Orie Rogo-Manduli. The agonization, the cynicism that the media projects is wrong. The debate here should be, what kind of leadership should we have? Mm-hmm. What kind of leadership do we deserve as citizens of Kenya? We deserve leaders who are squeaky clean, who are not stealing public assets and resources. And I'm one of them. I've worked at the highest level as an advisor to a prime minister. And there is not one single soul in this country that can come forward and say, Miguna stole this, Miguna misappropriated this, was involved in this tenderpreneuring, or I gave Miguna this bribe. I challenge anyone in this country to come forward and say that. Nobody can. No institution in this country has ever cast aspersions on me.
Thank you.
And as a lawyer, I have had the opportunity to steal public funds or client funds, because lawyers handle trust accounts for 23 years. That is very important. So we must look at people's criteria.
Thank you.
What is it that these people bring forward? And then we look at their policies and programs. If these people are only coming forward, and I can assure you, none of my opponents have a manifesto. They just talk, but you ask them. So why should Kenyans vote for you? Number one, there are a lot of questions about your integrity.
Thank you.
Number two, you have no manifesto.
Thank you. Let's hear from Alice.
We do have leaders of integrity in this country, and really we cannot be very mean on ourselves and Kenyans, because this is our society. We must be able to rise to the occasion and say we have leaders, and we need to continuously encourage and develop leaders with integrity. And of course we must insist on integrity as part of the criteria and qualifications of leaders that will be given public offices, because they will also be handling public resources. But we also must agree as a society that the best we are producing as leaders is the best of us. Mm-hmm. That is us. So we are not going to come from the mass. That is us, and it's a value system that we need to enhance so that Kenyans can start putting value on leaders of integrity than money, as my sister has said.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Joshua.
Now, when it comes to integrity, I think it's a process. It's a slow process, but I think we are starting that question. For once, if we can have it as an issue in election, the only thing is that we just need to show that it can work. Let's start somewhere. And importantly, that discourse again can be helped if we start electing one or two. And I think I may agree with her in this way that not 100% all of them are bad. There are one or two, and this 1, 2 are the ones that maybe we need to project and maybe laud them, bring them up, and let it be seen that if we have one, and let it even come from the people, let the people say it and see the same. So I think in this election, that question is, that particular issue will come to question. If we are able to get from voters, at least for once, now that we have up to 4,000 independents, and I think I'd be more keen with the independents that never participated in party nominations. The ones that from the word go, they went as independent. That is the start, yeah, possibly Miguna and the rest. So I think if we start electing, it starts somewhere. If we start electing such good people, or if we start electing people with integrity, then going forward it will be easy to sustain the same.
Thank you. Kimani Wamatangi.
Yeah, sure. No, I think, Debarl, our political culture, the norm we have set in politics as how we play our politics, are completely in contravention, and they are at their nemesis with integrity. And we have to say precisely how things are, because if you look at the most popular politicians today, the most powerful politicians in every side or from every area, the ones who are the worst keepers of integrity, the ones who are the worst in keeping their word, the ones who have the worst or the lowest respect for leadership, are the ones who are powerful. And how many times have you seen a politician stand up, make completely outrageous remarks, from risasi moja to watu kadhaa wakufe, and then from there, then the next thing, the guy is a hero. And when he goes to Uhuru Park, they'll be cheering and adulations. How many times have these claims been made of people literally looting the entire economy, and after looting, they go back to their communities?
Thank you.
And those are the big guys.
Thank you.
So we have to say these things are there, and unless we redraw a new chapter and ensure that this law in Chapter 6 starts to be implemented,
thank you,
then we have no political future.
Thank you.
But I, think I want to interject here and say one thing. I want the Kenyan voter to understand that there is, we notice a revolution. They are coming of age. It's slow, but it's happening. It's happening. The way that they've done things this year, I can say that there is hope, and that they should hang on to that vein. If they hang on to that vein, things should be better next election and the next one.
Thank you.
It is not all hopeless. It's not all hopeless at all.
Right.